Welcome to the April meeting of the Commission on Aging. Thanks for everybody for joining us on a holiday week when we probably would not necessarily have a quorum, but we just did make our quorum, so that's a good thing. We are still short a couple of members from both the Democrats and the Republicans. Hopefully they will be joining us soon. But our first order of business is the April minutes. Does anybody have any questions or changes related to the April minutes? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the April minutes? Thank you. And second, thank you. All in favor? I appreciate that. Awesome. Next issue is Beth Paris cannot join us today, so we'll have her April report during our May meeting. And so I'll turn it over to Ally to talk about the Human Services report. I'm sorry.
Yes, we will have Pat Broderick. I mean, she's already, she's a Democrat that I got her to agree, and she'll definitely be here.
Fantastic. Well, that's good news. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Nice. Good morning.
Morning.
Renters Rebate, the program, the annual program that we have that helps people over 65 or people who are on disability. We're starting to take applications in May. So anyone who meets the criteria, the income level for a single person is $38,100. For a married couple, it's $46,400. You have to have been living in Connecticut for a year. The nice thing about this program is people get an actual check. And it can be up to $700. So I think did about 40 applications. Cynthia Hall does all the applications. So we're starting to make appointments for May. There's still time to get to apply for tax credits through the assessors, as you have till May 16th. Just wanted to remind you about that. And there's until May 19th, people can apply for energy assistance, which helps with the heating bills, not for oil deliveries, that's done, but any other heating source, there's still time for that. Another thing I want to talk about, something new, is the mental health first aid training that the town is sponsoring after the recent tragedies in town. We've collaborated with a woman named Dawn Roy, who's trained in this program. It's wonderful. It's for lay people. It's for anyone in the community. And I have some flyers I can hand out to you. So we're using ARPA funds, the money that was designated for mental health services, and it's going to be free of charge. We had 30 people fill up the first day, so now we have 2 more sessions. So it's great. I did it myself personally. The next 2 sessions, one will be an all day on a Sunday, it's going to be at Post 53, from 8:30 to 5, and it educates you about mental illnesses, but also how to interact with someone who's in distress. It's really good. And now the 2, so we have one on the 5th of June, which is a Sunday, which is an all-day one, and then another 2-day session broken up from 8:30 to 1 o'clock. So they're filling up quickly too, and if they fill up, we'll do it again, because I think there's a real need, and people want to be better equipped or educated on how to deal with people who are struggling. So,
have you talked to anyone at the Darien Library yet?
Oh yeah, there's a few of them. So it's open to anyone who lives in Darien, obviously, but also anyone who serves the Darien community. So there are some people from the library signed up to do it, some people from the Wire signed up, some posties are actually signed up.
I'm sorry. The Darien Library would be a good venue too to use the meeting room there.
Well, we actually do it. It's been done numerous times at Post 53, and the presenter did it there when I took it in 2013. So she has a whole setup there, and Joe has been very accommodating. So they do have a great venue, but they've kind of already established the setup there. So it's open to anybody.
Teachers are eligible?
Anyone.
Teachers in the school system? As long as they're serving.
Yep. So it's a great program, and like I said, I'll pass these around. It's on the town website. You basically email me, and I will let you know if you want to do it. And if there's room still, if not, then we'll add another session. But there's definitely a huge interest in it, and it's wonderful training to attend.
Yeah, especially coming out of COVID, as well as with our recent tragedies. I mean, there's so much
It's rampant
pain out there.
There is so much suffering.
And I don't think we're ever going to figure out how much. It's just that to just figure out 2 years worth of isolation. What does that do to human beings? It's not a good situation.
No. So
But it's good that they're doing something to try to help us cope.
Yeah. So take advantage. I'll pass them around.
Great. Thanks, Ally. Any other questions? Hearing none. Our next agenda item is discussing the focus of our commission and we are at 6 members. So the first question for this commission is today an appropriate day to talk about that, given our limited numbers? And given that we have no other agenda items at the moment, other than old new business, I think we should go forward at least to start the conversation, to think about local, state, federal, where we can be most effective. And one of the things we've talked about on the local level is walkability, and the question of how we can make our town more walkable. On the state level, we've talked about commissions, the loss of our Commission on Aging as a commission at the state level to be merged with various other concerns. And of course, on the federal level, we see the issues relating to anything involving Medicare, Social Security, the things Ally deals with as far as people trying to fill out various forms and things of that nature. So I'll open the floor, and Peter, I'm going to turn to you first, because you are by far our most connected person with AARP and the state legislators. So I'm interested in your thoughts as to where we can be most effective.
First of all, I agree with your opening remarks that we really need a much fuller commission to discuss this, both Democrats and Republicans and independents. Having said that, of the 3 things you've spoken about, I mean, walkability is already, let's increase it to livable communities, because walking is just one part of a livable community, is well underway in a lot of our towns around the state. And there are models there are systems there. And yes, the Commission on Aging endorsing this as an activity for this town, I think makes a tremendous amount of sense, given our town is changing, and we are going to be a walkable community in 10 years. All you have to do is go over to Palmer's and look around, and you're going to see there's going to be a lot less people, I think, in 10 years driving around, and a lot more people walking around. But as I said last time, it's not just putting a street light up. It's a very complex thing. And what we find is that in towns where it's happened, there's been a champion. And usually it's the top politician, or perhaps the top real estate person, the top builder that have the most influence in town. I'm not sure what, as a commission, we can do beyond encouraging that and providing them with thoughts and resources. Does anybody have any thoughts on that?
I have a question. I don't know if this is currently in place, but is there anything in place that, for developers, guidance, guidelines, etc., that would, mandate's too strong a word, but encourage very strongly development in that regard? I mean, if you have a new development coming up, as we do here,
Right.
several, is there anything on the town level that is saying, yes, you can do this, but XYZ has to happen in terms of access, walkability?
I don't think there's anything that's, Mary, that's grounded in law, for example, but again...
It's a pressure thing. Pressure point is, I guess, what I'm thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, and so you Genovese and a couple of other names, and you link them with some senior leaders in the town, it can get done, because they'll get some harmony and say, yeah, this is a good idea, and yes, it's going to benefit all of us. But I don't think there's any, and I think pointing to a law and saying you've got to do this, that doesn't really solve the problem anyway.
No,
It's got to
no.
be people with the vision to say, this is our community's changing.
Right.
It's very interesting in doing aging in place organizations and ARP. There are some towns that were very walkable, and they had other issues like transportation, for example. Transportation was terrible, public transportation, not-for-profit transportation, but walking was no problem. It really depends on the geography in the topography of the town. I mean, think about us. I mean, we're divided by two major highways, a railroad. So we have, every town is really unique. But you need somebody who has a vision for the town in 10 years.
Right.
Commission on Aging, well, the third one was the federal level.
Or the state, I mean, in other words, where.
Well, I'm gonna skip to the federal, I'll come back to the
Perfect.
state.
Perfect.
I think on the federal level, no. Our role here should be to look at federal issues that might apply to us here in town. And if there's something where there's a tipping point by our actions, then I'd say, yeah, then we should look at it. But as a ongoing charge, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
I truly don't think so. And enough of us serve, I think, on other organizations that provide that focus. On the state level, yeah, I think, personally, I think that we should take a look at other commissions on aging, see what they're doing, find out what they're doing, see what challenges they have, see what successes they have, and see how we can, over time, either assist them in being better or taking some of their practices and making us more efficient. But those would be my views.
Jim?
Yeah, I definitely don't think we have a role to play with the federal government. As a matter of fact, I would be just the opposite of that. I just don't think then you're going to get back into cookie cutter mandates and everything else that don't really apply to what our mission is and what we're trying. I think that's very important. I think with the issue of livability, walkability, and Peter touched on it with having a champion. Now is the time, with all of the development going on, to have that vision start to be implemented. The problem we're going to have, if it's 10 years from now, we're going to be retrofitting. And I liken it to, they did some work on one of the roads. This was like 2 years ago, but I could give multiple examples. And they dug up the road and put a big trench in, laid a bunch of stuff in, filled it in. And 14 months later, they came back and dug it up and put some more stuff in. So I think getting the developers involved is important. I agree with not it being from a legalistic perspective, but I think there is a role for planning and zoning. At least there's criteria for what we should be looking at, whether or not you have to mandate to them, you have to have these kind of walkways or this. I don't think that's the way to go. But I think if you call upon the people who are developing here in town, they're responsible people, and in general, I think they would listen to people's opinion. The problem is you have to have opinions. What is it that really does make it walkable? Is it just having more like handicap access type things on streets? Is it a more sophisticated system of signaling? Does the state really, when they do the timing, for instance, of stoplights and everything, take into account that you're trying to come out of the train station parking lot, and this just has to do with driving, and there are two out-of-sync lights that cause problems for pedestrians, cause problems for drivers, and it's a serious issue. So to me, I think there is a role there, but I'm not sure I know enough about what really constitutes livability, and Peter, I've read some of the things you've done. But in general, I think we do have a role there. I think as influencers, again, I really don't believe in mandates in this area. I just don't think it works because there's, as Peter described, every community is unique. New Canaan, I consider to be very walkable, but why wouldn't it be? It's all in one area. You can walk around, and it's a great place to go to walk, but at the end of the day, that will have pockets of that, but the whole town is never going to be walkable. It can't work. So, and I think at the state level, what Peter's doing and being aware of how we can help our state legislators from this area carry the banner for us, I think it's very important. And to be honest with you, I think we do a really good job of interacting and engaging our representatives. I think we get particularly good both feedback and as well as influence from people like Terry and others. So, and then the other thing is, I think the first selectman has got to be absolutely on board and committed to this. I don't know if she is or not.
Right. So, sorry, I want to make sure we get Mary, additional thoughts?
I agree with what you're saying. I think I disagree with mandates also. I'm sorry I didn't use that word, but I was kind of thinking about if I were on planning and zoning, for example, how do you make things happen? Influence in terms of, this is part of the puzzle when you're doing a development, and part of the puzzle is what are you offering us in terms of walkability. So just moving it up the scale of importance, and maybe focus in the longer term, so that we have some kind of, if we have a plan in terms of what areas we want to address in terms of geography, because I think you're right, it's not going to happen everywhere, and you really need it where the concentration of people are walking, right? I think we do a pretty good job with, around the schools, and we have crossing guards, we have, availability of, kids can walk to school in some of the neighborhoods, which is great. It's not perfect, but I think looking at how that was addressed in the past maybe is a way for us to kind of hijack that thinking and use it in our own commercial area. As far as the state level, I think I agree also that we've done a pretty good job in terms of staying informed. I don't know about advocacy in terms of how much influence we should have on the state level. I think being informed and having some kind of input is very important, but I don't know that as far as I'm concerned, I'm really interested in the local issues from my seat here. And federal, I agree also. I think that's a spider's web. It could be really important at some point, but maybe an issue, but not necessarily something on an ongoing basis.
Don't want to put everybody on the spot. Other thoughts?
I agree with both of you. I agree with Jim. I would like to know more about what's already in the plans, and with connecting with planning and zoning, about what Dave Genovese is doing, what the developers are doing over in Roten Heights, and just educate ourselves so we know what's already in the works and go from there. And I like your cookie cutter idea, like what has been working here is a very positive way to look at it.
Right.
I get concerned, I hear about this, like the approval of the child care thing, at that corner in Roten Heights, and then you start thinking of the train station, and you think of all the cars that are going to be moving at almost the same time and everything. I'm just wondering who's been thinking all that out. It would be good for us to get informed about that.
Rick?
I will talk to my developer friends and see what their reaction is.
Okay.
I'm not well versed in this, but I believe David Genovese was working with the state and having more crosswalks and I don't know the details, but I know it sounds familiar that there was, which will be great because downtown is certainly congested and it's going to be more so, but I'm not sure what it is, but I know that I've heard something about him getting more crosswalks. I'm like, does that sound familiar?
Mhm.
And if there's any kind of influence, I know it's been tried in the past, and there's a current effort out there to educate drivers in particular. There are places where in the world where you can look at crosswalks and they, like in the UK where they have the zebra crossings, whatever, where the lights are. And you're mandated to, not mandated, I'm using that word again. That is a law. You have to stop if somebody is in that crosswalk. People don't even have to stop. They can just go off, that's not very smart, but they are everywhere. And they're in the cities, they're in the towns, they're everywhere. And everybody knows that you have to stop at a crossing. And there's no light. It's just a flashing yellow light saying,
Yeah, I like
here's a
that,
crossing.
too.
It amazes me
It
how many
used to
people
drive me
don't
crazy,
follow
but-
the crosswalks here, right? They
Right.
have to make, even on the road, and
Even when it
Coming-
says stop, don't
Yeah.
walk or whatever.
you see someone, or a kid, or someone walking their dog, and people just fly right by.
Yeah.
They use these little signal lights, you see, you don't have to think about the big signal thing on the state highway. You can do smaller lights, which we really don't use much here.
Right.
We have a little bit like at a railroad track or something. That might be a really good thing to think about.
Well, they're, in the
Stone.
UK, they're orange
Orange balls,
on
yeah.
each side, and they're not obtrusive,
No.
but it gets
It's
your
just
attention.
enough to really, get your attention.
And because people are trained, so to speak, learn, that's something everybody does, it then becomes, a truth unto itself. It's just what it is and what you have to do. That is a tall order, obviously, for, generations to come, but it's just one of those things that we could, maybe should be looked at in terms of this would be a great thing to have, especially at Norotan Heights where the train station goes across. That walkway, people don't stop.
Never.
Even though they should, they don't. And, people are not getting hit by cars but there is, that definitely declines or decreases the walkability of that area if you don't have some kind of safe crossing.
Now, it sounds to me, I think we have consensus, correct me if I'm wrong, at least on this livability issue, right? That livability, walkability, a focus of our commission, contacting developers, contacting local officials, maybe even state officials, depending on for example, US 1 coming right through town. And so I heard, Ray, you've got developer contacts.
And I'll talk to Steve Mulvaney, who heads P&Z.
Because it might be helpful if we can get them in here.
Well, I was going to try to get Steve to come in.
Awesome.
I can do Dave
He'll
Genovese.
come in if he's got the
Great.
time.
See if we
Dave
can.
Genovese is interesting too because of his whole approach to underground parking.
Yes.
Like he's making this big hole, the next big hole, but his whole underground parking system is gonna be it's being built out somewhere off limits, and then they're gonna bring it in. He said if it's not ready, he's not gonna sink it into a hole and have us live the whole winter with this hole. But what I'm trying to say is he's getting parking underneath. Look what we have now, where everybody's backing out of. Parking's all in front, Norotan Heights, in front of the whole toy box. That's just a disaster. It was always a disaster. But yeah, I think you get him probably.
So we can start with the police, we can start with Steve and a couple of the others. So we got to talk to the police department and public works.
And planning and zoning.
Right.
And the office of the selectman.
Yes,
Definitely the office of the selectman,
absolutely.
because nothing's gonna happen.
Fair, but the question is, let's talk reality. The selectmen are now off on the Ziegler property, right? That appears to be their number one issue at the moment. Correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. And I'm not saying we don't do that. My question is, to build momentum, is it the developers? Is it P&Z? Is it other folks? Or do we need to try to go to the selectman's office immediately? I'm just throwing it out there.
Well, I think you have to have your ducks in a row before
Yeah, I
you
agree.
go there. Because, again, I would include the realtor community.
Yeah.
They've got a big stake in this.
Mhm.
And, there's lots of influential people in town in that business that I believe could be very helpful and are influential.
Do you know them?
I played bridge with a bunch of them.
That's a good
That's a
place
good
to
start.
be discussing it.
Place, exactly.
And I've already met with Parks and Recs Commissioner, and she has a lot of information on it, so, I mean, there's been absolutely no response. And I followed up with it, but I'm busy, but I'm gonna get to it.
Okay.
But I think we need to be more informed, starting with the developers and planning and zoning, and get informed, and then have the selectmen, definitely have the selectmen
Right.
on some of the findings or what we're thinking.
Well, ultimately, especially if we're gonna go towards local laws, right, we'll
Yeah.
certainly need that, certainly need funding from the town or the state, we'll need that. But I think what I'm hearing is, at least at the start, to try to get some of the power players in here to talk about where they see this, whether they'd be willing to be advocates, would seem to be a good niche for us to start with, and to see if we can build momentum towards it. Is that correct? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, what we really want to find out is whose radar screen is this on? It doesn't do us
Yeah,
any good at
exactly.
all because we can't actualize anything other than trying to be a coalition builder, trying to put the ideas out there. But at the end of the day, this has got to be something that they feel is important. And to be honest with you, I have no idea what the town in general feels about livability.
They need to know someone's paying attention, that's the number one thing.
And who's willing to be an
And
advocate?
enforce,
Yeah.
not just talking,
Right.
but you're really watching what they're doing. You know, they think they can just, I mean, look at the people with the trees, you know, God, that was a big deal because they were paying attention. We may disagree or agree, I don't know, but they have to see that we really think it's serious and important.
Let me come back to one other thing that Jim said, and that's our relationship with our legislators. And again, our town is unique for its size in that we have 2 state senators representing us and possibly 3 representatives, depending on how they slice up Darien once again. Senator Billy Miller, who represents a part of us, replaced Senator Carlo Leone. And Senator Billy Miller is turning out to be quite an advocate for elder issues.
Good.
And so I think as we got to know and embraced, and she embraced us, Terry Woods, we ought to, and she won't be with us, I think, after November, we should be also working on these other folks to, at times, get them to come in and talk to us and have us share with them our opinions. Again, a lot of towns don't have this influence. And we've Bob Duff, you know, he's the most senior member of the legislature now. I mean, and whether or not we agree with what his positions are, he still needs to hear us and has to realize that there are 3 sides to every story.
Yep, agreed.
It also would be important to know that what we're advocating for is not something that's going to be undercut by the state for some reason.
Right.
You know,
Mhm.
which is where the legal things come, you know, the regulations come into play.
Or
So,
vice versa.
yeah, so, or not, right, so, that information would be helpful so that we don't promote something that is impossible.
Okay, so battle plan. Before the main meeting, you'll make your meeting, you'll make your meeting, you'll make meetings, okay? And see what responses we get from developers, realtors. I'm meeting with a town official on Friday morning. I'll talk about it as well. And see whether we can start to get some of these people to show up here. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
I have a meeting tomorrow with a former state rep who was a state rep for 25 years. So I'll sound him out.
Sure.
See what he has to say, yeah.
And let's report back at the May meeting and see if we can, you know, first of all, see if anybody's available for our June meeting. So for example, check with your sources to say, hey, are you available to meet with us on June, the third Wednesday in June at 9 a.m. and room 119?
Or May.
Or May, I mean, if you can, sure, absolutely. Just let me know early so I can make sure that person's on the agenda.
Right.
And lay back on the selectmen, we don't need them until we hear more information.
Right, it sounds like right now we're doing some investigation as to where people are and what's already already happening, right? And then trying to build off of that and say, okay, how do we make our town more livable, more walkable? Where are the power players who are interested in this, right? And who'd be willing to move with this? Because when I'm hearing lack of mandates, and I'm also, quite frankly, very conscious of the fact that $0 of our wonderful money from the millions we got from the feds were spent on anything involving sidewalks or walkways, to my knowledge. I made the phone call Ally suggested, didn't get a response. So at the end of the day, I'm not sure that money is going to be exactly available for this. And so we need to, until we get so much of a groundswell that we can push folks to it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, if somebody's got some connections that say, hey, Joe, you're wrong, we can get money here, here, and here, I'm glad to hear it.
Does the money come from here, from Darien?
Well, it's allocated. In other words,
They're
there's
already spending so much money on so much, you know, on the Royal thing and the Oxridge, and now they have the Ziegler property. I mean, is that same pool of funds?
Oh, yeah. And
Oh
you're
my
bonding
God.
it.
They're really overextended.
Well, they're bonding, right? And
Yeah,
this
they're
is-
bonding.
And so as a result, that's the question. What would they be willing to do? But when they got free money, okay, let's be clear. When they got free money, we still got none to
Yeah.
these issues, okay? To my knowledge, okay?
That's when the selectmen come into the.
Well, it'd be nice, but at the end of the day, I just simply say that the groundswell has to be, what are developers doing? What do realtors
Yeah.
think? What do PNC think?
Yeah.
And then moving from there, and then to advocate, should we need it for town, state funds to make this happen? It's gonna have to be, to Peter's point, some of these movers and shakers who are going to be, and again, I agree that the Commission on Aging is certainly not the body which is gonna move this, but if we can be an entity which gets this groundswell going, I think that's something we can be quite effective at, because we have a heck of a lot of contacts in this room.
Well, and Ray mentioned Public Works earlier. Basically, these should be funded, most of them, the way I understand what we would want to do, would be funded as part of what is the normal program of things that Public Works does. So how do you get onto their budget?
Right.
It's no different to me, and the developers have an obligation here.
Mhm.
How much money are the developers, for instance, in Norotan Heights, spending on landscape?
Mhm.
Now, the town's not paying for that, they're paying for it, but they're paying for it because it's part of the whole program for people who are going to be living there and shopping there. So I think getting the developers to also understand that they need to have in their plans at least some funding for whatever we define it to be. Not we, but whatever is defined as far as walkability and livability. Now, if you notice, in between the Walgreens and that, there's beautiful, the way they're doing the walkways in there and all of that. So in some ways, people are already spending money on walkability as a result of it's going in as new.
Mhm.
And I think it's much more palatable to people if in fact it's just part of the normal. We're not saying, because we'll get into the conversation you were just bringing up, oh no, this is on top of everything else we're doing. Don't you know we've got all these projects? Well, yeah, we know that. And yet, every year, there's a budget submitted, and that budget has a list of projects. And the question is, how do you crack that budget code, and how do you get into the plans? And I don't know if the town has a strategic plan, but typically, a budget is just the first year of implementing a strategic plan. And I don't know if we do that or not, but at the end of the day, to me, there's a practical way to fund this without getting into all of the negative conversations. And at all costs, I think we should avoid that.
They're also,
We
they also
we have to remember,
do-
the builders, they build according to code,
Mhm.
right? So we set the code.
Right.
And then they have to follow that. So if we set it up in the code, that they have to allocate so much space per square foot for walking, then they have to do it. So it comes from us, the town.
Right, I think, yeah, we're coming full circle on that. I think that they're planning, and it seems like current development looks like it's going in the right direction in some regards. So I think that's what I was trying to point out at the beginning. They have to do something anyway.
Right.
So guidelines that will, or
Code.
code, whatever it happens to be, however strong you want to make that, are things that are, they're really just guidelines, maybe not even code, but this is what the town wants.
And I think an example of,
It's really delineated by code. I've done a lot of construction, so
Yeah.
it's really done by code. If the code is set by the town, builder has to follow it.
so planning and zoning has to be engaged in it. In some ways, Public Works has to be engaged in it if they're the ones that, in working with developers, are carrying out work. Like, for instance, when we did for Norotan Heights, all the way down West Avenue, all of that work that had to be done to provide the new power sources and all of that stuff, that had to be a partnership. That had to be coordination between the town and between the developers, between planning and zoning had to agree to all of that. So I think you're absolutely right, Ray and Mary. I think that's the way to go. I think in trying to help people understand why this is important, and it's interesting, again, I keep going back to Norotan Heights, but think about if 15 years ago, people were sitting around the table and discussing, we've got to do something about the flooding issues in Norotan Heights and in the town itself. And think of all the things, all the money that has been spent on other things that had nothing to do with flooding, and probably some of that should have been spent back then. You need to change infrastructure when it's time to change infrastructure, and you want to do it as early as possible. And I think people need to start understanding, the sooner we think about these things and the sooner we get plans in place, we're going to offset a lot of potential future problems and costs. Because we'll end up, you watch what happens with maintenance costs and everything for the town when these new developments all come online. Their budgets are going to go through the ceiling. They have to, because we're bringing on more and more things that are going to cost money to maintain. Having said that, well, that's great. That's good stuff. We're doing it because we're growing.
Joe, we'll start with Steve O'Vaney at P&Z.
Okay.
Because that'll,
I think that's
That
good.
Yeah.
might give us a lot of basic
I'll
information.
talk to him and see if we can get him in here. He may
Okay,
not
so-
want to be on.
Well,
Cameron,
he's
but-
gonna have to be on TV 79 if he's gonna be with us, that's the reality. So see if Steve can join us for our May meeting. Let's start there, okay? And maybe you can see if our friend Mr. David Genovese might be available in the June meeting, okay? And then you can check with your realtors to see what they think about joining us, possibly in the fall,
Right.
okay?
Okay.
And so we can start that ball rolling, okay? But I think that's right. I think that Steve O'Vaney first would make
Yeah,
the
let's-
most sense.
Let's see where we are now
Mhm.
Right.
before starting to reinvent the wheel, yeah.
But even so, I'm hearing at least, correct me if I'm wrong, that the focus of our powder, okay, federal, state, local, let's start with livability, walkability as our prime directive, and obviously we have state issues. We'll eliminate federal issues except to the extent that Ally brings them to us as far as that's concerned, okay? Would that be a correct consensus of this group today, at least, with the limited number of people we have?
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks for a great discussion. I won't ask for a motion. I think we'll just go with the sense of the meeting and go from there. Okay, all right, we're good?
All right.
All right, perfect. Next question is old business.
Old business.
Peter?
A couple of things. A tax aid program is now finished at the library. It finished at 9 o'clock on Monday night.
Wow.
The last day I worked there was on Friday. We had four councils. We did 51 filings.
Wow.
And I'm thinking probably we will have done upwards of more than 1,000 filings this year, which puts us back at higher than pre-COVID levels. And even though we did filings during the COVID period as well, is a tremendous burden on the library, and they did a marvelous job, an absolute marvelous job.
We sent a few clients there and they were thrilled.
Yeah.
So appreciative. And what a great
And,
service.
and again, it wasn't just seniors, again, it's for anyone with a simple tax return, regardless of how much money they make. I heard that there was one or two approaching $1 million. Old people, 95, young people, a 12-year-old kid who was getting royalties from for something that he was in that he had to pay taxes on. Au pairs who are coming back now. So it's a marvelous service, and it's all volunteers. So again, hats off to the library. Let's talk about legislative issues. So far, 2 successes. And I'm using AARP's playbook. There are others, of course, with other issues of focusing on seniors. Bill number HB 5262 passed, and that's the expansion of absentee ballots. So that is passed. And the whole thought is to move it forward to the point where it gets onto the general election in a way that people will understand it. It was on years ago. It was so confusing that people voted against it. The second one, which I found really fascinating, was a very small victory. And it was the town of Newington was defeated from consolidating its polling places from 8 to 3. So the town of Newington wanted to essentially take 8 polling places and make it into 3. The community, especially seniors, were against it, and so they're not allowed to do it. But I think that's a wonderful example of activity on a very local level. Okay. Now we'll go to the not so good news, okay? A number of bills were not successful. Some that livable communities, the right of using development of housing, minimal overall gross density of 15 dwelling units per acre. That was defeated. Also defeated was caregivers' pay. Also defeated, which I really was disappointed about, was long-term care insurance. So again, there was a bill there to look at, and that would be State SB 409. SB 409. A number of things have been just kicked down the road. Again, I'm just showing what happens in Hartford or any state legislature. A needs study for caregiving. 2 of those. A needs study for long-term care. A needs study for older adult needs, what they've done is they said, you know, we don't want to deal with this, but we want to establish a study group, which essentially says it's not going to go probably anywhere over a period of time. There's still a lot of outstanding issues. The Alzheimer supplement was not approved, okay? And the I'll call it, just because it's me that's saying it, the euthanasia bill was also not moved forward. But I'm going to read you the note about that said, the opponents resorted to a rarely used parliamentary maneuver to defeat the legislation. So essentially, they used the system to defeat something. And again, it's going to be revised. It's going to come back.
Well, it was a fascinating. I was intimately involved in that.
I know you
in that one. And so, but here's where it was fascinating. It got past public health, the Public Health Committee, and then it went to the Judiciary Committee. And what Peter was talking about was normally you'd have a full committee vote, including both House members and Senate members. In this case, the opponents were worried that the proponents finally had it, and so they split it. So only one side of the chamber got to vote, and it went down, I think 5-4, 6-5, with all Republicans and one Democrat opposed to kill it. And it's remarkable to me that you can, but a significant parliamentary maneuver, if you're opposed, that's a great thing. If you're pro, not so hot. But it shows you how hard legislation is to get passed, that you can have so much effort done to get through public health, to get to the Judiciary Committee, only to have a parliamentary maneuver kill it. So, again, it'll be back. I think this is the 15th, 16th, or 17th year it's died in committee, but it'll come back again.
There's still a lot to do. I mean, the session ends in 2 weeks.
Right.
I'll stop here. I could go on for a while. I'm going to be up in Hartford tomorrow, part of an AARP lobbying team. Again, prescription drugs being a critical one, elder care issues being another one. We made some progress in the last year with nursing home oversights and staffing, but we made them at the expense of thousands and thousands of their patients dying. So it took thousands of deaths to put into effect what we accomplished. And what we're trying to do is say, all right, you know what, you need to do this not necessarily because of the thousands of deaths, but you need to do this because more and more of us are living in these facilities, are relying on them, or have relatives there, and we need to provide better care.
No question. And the one thing I think we're taking away from what happened is the need to continue to allow people to stay at home. Those people who were home during COVID were far less likely to die than people in these facilities. Simple fact. And so for At Home in Darien and all the folks who are allowing folks to stay at home, at some levels it's life-saving. And so we also have to recognize, and although Gina's no longer with us in Darien, all the efforts that she made and all the folks at Home in Darien, it's huge. And so we have to recognize not only do we need to advocate for better nursing home care and all the things that go with that, but also recognize that staying at home is the best option for a lot of reasons.
And we know, Joe, for every dollar you spend, the government spends supporting someone living in their home, they spend $3 for having that person live in an institution. So it's worth it to the government to have people stay in their homes as well.
Absolutely.
Cost efficient.
Great. Anything else? Any questions for Peter? Any other old business?
Just an update on that Home in Darien.
Yep.
Good news is that we're in the process of hiring another driver because our rides are coming back now. We're getting past post-COVID numbers now, and we got a grant for a new van, which has really improved the services. It's just amazing how much better this is. We've added another member to our office staff. And you will all be receiving in the next couple of weeks, the At Home in Darien are about town,
Out and about.
out and about. And it'll have our annual report in it. And I would encourage everybody to look at the financials because it's a really well-run organization and it's worth supporting. And I've been associated with a lot of organizations that aren't so well-run. And this one fiscally is just unbelievably well-run. And you mentioned Gina leaving. We're in the process of job search. And we're having all the issues everybody else in the world is having, trying to find people to hire. So to the Channel 79 audience, if you or a relative or you've got someone who's looking for a nice job as executive director of At Home in Darien, we've got job postings. You can go out to the At Home in Darien website, and it's a very simple application process. There's a job description out there, and we would love to hear from you.
Awesome, fantastic.
Can I underscore what Jim is saying? We'll be doing our annual fundraising, right?
Yes, forgot that. Letters will be going out.
And again, just to stress the importance of it, okay? Take our sister town in New Canaan. They have about 275 members of their Aging in Place organization. 275. Their population, by the way, is about the same as our towns. We have 3,800 members. We are inclusive, they are exclusive. In other words, they were founded on the fact that the members would pay for the services, but guess what? The members couldn't possibly pay for the services, so they do fundraising as well. But they're doing fundraising to a core of people. Now, you can, in all fairness to them, you can join them if you don't have the funds, but you have to prove your lack of wealth. When we undertook Aging at Home in Darien 12 years ago, we said, no, it's for everyone. And everyone pays. So everyone in the community, we're asking for it. And so if you give $10 or $5 or $10,000 or $50,000 or a car or 200 hours of volunteer service, it's what drives it. It's what drives it. And I'm delighted to hear that it's just continuing to thrive. Thanks to Jim, board members like him.
We've got a great board. We really do.
Awesome. Ray, you got something? Nope, you're good? Okay, awesome. Any other old business? Any new business? Hearing none, okay, I have a motion to adjourn the April meeting. Thank you, Ray. Thanks, Mary, for a second. All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in May.
Raymond?